established civil society organization in Athens. And we have with us Antonio Mihajlov, who is an executive director at Subversive Front, and Apostolis Karampairis, organizer of Thessaloniki Pride. We can give the floor to the speakers to tell a few things about their job.
But first, to introduce the topic, so we will give the common title of the podcast is Cooperation Under the Common Rainbow. So welcome to the both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Who wants to go first?
Okay, let it be me then. Yes, I'm the senior advisor at Subversive Front, but I'm also going to speak on behalf of Skopje Pride, the first one that we had in 2019, with huge support from our international partners, one of them being Thessaloniki Pride. And I'm really happy that I'm part of this podcast because it addresses one of my very dear issues, which is, of course, cooperation across the borders, in particular between North Macedonia and Greece, because these types of cooperation are not so many. And we are very happy to proudly say that we have had this successful cooperation for over 5 years now, I think. Thessaloniki Pride was one of our first supporters. They have had their promotional materials in Macedonian language being written a couple of years ago for many occasions of the Pride, of Thessaloniki Pride. And it was the only Pride actually that we could go to and feel that we are at home. However, this was even more amplified when we held our first Skopje Pride 2019, when not only Greece, but also activists from Bulgaria, Serbia, Albania, Kosovo came and held their speeches on the stage in the city park of Skopje, which is kind of a symbolic play of what it means to have cooperation with all the regional Pride or Pride organizers, especially when it comes in a context that has so many similar issues, so many similar battles, and so many similar struggles, but also sharing a very similar vision, and that is advancement of the human rights and the status of the LGBTI people living in the Balkans. I think for me personally, this is really always like the Greek activists and cooperation with them has been very dear to me, just because that it was also the first Pride that I attended to, Thessaloniki Pride. And also it was the first international activists that I met for the first time a long time ago. So I'm very happy always when I meet with them or discuss with them and share or do something together with them. I would also applaud to see in action and utilize cooperation. I think this is really good in establishing a bigger understanding between the two nations, and especially between the youth, because youth are the ones that we as an organization, but also as Skopje Pride, invest so much into, just because we see the potential for making a change or contribution to making a change much bigger there than in the other groups. And I'm looking forward to see where this cooperation will head to. Thank you.
The cooperation will head towards whenever we will lead the cooperation to, and I'm very glad to hear this personal story, especially. So, Apostolis, hi.
Yes, hello from Thessaloniki. Well, this is all very touching and very motivational and inspirational, I would say. Antonio covered most of our connections, let's say our links and our common vision. For us also, Skopje Pride is, we are Thessaloniki Pride, so we're primarily a Pride organizing association. And Skopje Pride, being our closest geographically Pride, has an important position in our heart, in our vision. And if I am to speak for me, it's a shared goal, because the LGBTI community isn't only in Thessaloniki, it's beyond, and we face a common fate. We struggle for the same difficulties, discriminations, and in international cooperation, actually, and most importantly, regional cooperation is our very top in our agenda. And we will discuss later during this podcast how we advance it. But yes, indeed, it has also to do with the people that are in this in the movement. You know, when you see visionaries with and you share the same vision, then you have no other choice than to work together and bear fruit in this wonderful field.
Nice.
And thanks for the honor to have us your first podcast in this series.
It's quite inspirational to see how much have been done in the movements and in the prides. So Alex, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I would like to say that this podcast is like one of the reasons in order to indicate in a really like weird period that we are facing due to COVID-19, to far-right political parties that we see in Europe, that we need to indicate the protection of the human rights that all the people in Europe must have, not only in Europe, but also globally, and specifically the LGBTQ plus rights in Europe that we see the last years that are facing a huge like danger. So yeah, you can proceed, Anelia.
And I'm also a true believer that much more things can be achieved if we cooperate regionally and especially on a bilateral level. If we are alone, excluded, isolated, I think that we cannot do anything. But now let's explore more about the current situation in the both countries. So I would like to ask you, the both of you, to go more in details about the concern of the legal framework and the existing stereotypes, marriage rights, adoption from same-sex couples. What is the condition in North Macedonia? What is the condition in Greece? And let's see what is similar, what is different, and what can we learn from one of each other.
Yes, well, I can say on behalf of North Macedonia, legislation-wise, we're not that advanced when it comes to in comparison to the other regional countries, but also in Europe. We only have now anti-discrimination law, a comprehensive anti-discrimination law that covers and protects against discrimination against sexual orientation LGBT people. Which means we can legally complain and ask for legal remedy when it comes to discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, happening either in state institutions or access to goods and services or elsewhere. We have had this law since last year, so since October 2020, but it was a 10-year battle because the first law that was adopted was 10 years ago, 2010, which did not include SOGI as grounds of discrimination, although it was used and complaints were submitted forward or toward the Commission for Protection Against Discrimination. When it comes to hate speech or hate crime, we only have protection against the hate crime based on SOGI, meaning the criminal code recognizes sexual orientation and gender identity as aggravating circumstances when hate crimes occur. When it comes to hate speech, this is not the case. We cannot criminally seek legal remedy against perpetrators of hate speech based on SOGI. However, there is part of the criminal code that protects against any kind of discriminatory speech, including the one based on political beliefs or national or ethnic origin or religious beliefs, and other grounds. We use the other grounds very often to submit complaints and ask for protection based on against hate speech based on SOGI. When it comes to the other rights that we have and have demanded since, we have started the amendments to the law on civil registry, meaning We want to regulate the legal gender recognition for trans people to be able to have their ID documents in compliance with their gender identity or who they are. And we have still not come to the point where the parliament will adopt the amendments to the law on civil registry. However, we're aiming to that, we're advocating for that. And we have, since February last year, we have started the work on the National Action Plan for Advancing the Human Rights of the LGBTI, which provides a comprehensive framework for protection against discrimination, violence, and all other types of human rights abuses of LGBT people in the areas such as education, healthcare, social work, police, judiciary, media, and so on. It's a national action plan that has been adopted or become part of the national program for adoption of the acquis communautaire, of the law of the EU. And it is one of the requirements that the country has to fulfill should it want to become a member of the EU in the next 5 years. Apart from that, I think it's very important, but we can talk about it later in details. I think it's very important that the law or the legal situation reflects what the community demands are. And so far, we have not been able actually to request or to demand regulation of same-sex couples or partnerships, nor the other rights coming out from regulation of these kind of relationships. It's just, among the others, adoption of children and so on. We hope that this will start in autumn or this year, or at least spring next year, because there are more than tens of same-sex couples living together, and some of them having children. Some of the children are already in school age, so I think it's high time that we start with it. Finally, when it comes to protection against violence, we do have a comprehensive law of protection against violence against women and domestic violence, which also recognizes the violence against LGBT people, because Macedonia has ratified the Istanbul Convention. And this means that the countries has to provide protection from violence against LGBTI through its either financing or advocating for protection against violence mechanisms. And this is, I think, all that I want to say at this point.
Yes, so we always start from the legal framework. According to the well-known map of ILGA, which ranks the countries according to the legal framework regarding the LGBTI rights, Greece is somewhere in the median, meaning that compared to other countries, we are more or less an average one. Regarding the EU countries, not such a good record. But I think the problem is not, we have a lot of laws in place, but the real problem is implementation. So although Greece ranks quite good, it doesn't reflect on our experience. So yes, regarding the emblematic laws of civil partnership and gender and legal gender recognition, we have them in place for some, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years now. There is an anti-discrimination law. There is even, reflecting on what Antonio said, we even have criminalized the hate speech, homophobic and transphobic hate speech. But this is, especially this law, is very difficult to enact, because you have to prove that hate speech led to a hate crime, which it's very difficult to prove. And generally, the first law in Greece, I think, to be in place was protection at the workplace, and also if we go really back, the criminalization of homosexuality was done in the 50s, if I'm not mistaken. So quite early compared to the European average. But as I told you before, the real problem is implementation and how we will train the institutions to enact and implement these laws. Also, and this is a very recent development, because I also heard Antonio mentioning it. We have the so-called national strategy, which, yes, in Greece was really late in doing it. We had some laws scattered here and there, but recently, under the initiative of the Prime Minister office, we drafted this national strategy for LGBTI equality, and I had the honor to be a member of that committee. But you know, it's just the first step for a comprehensive LGBTI policy. We have to see the implementation of it, because we drafted just the national strategy. Now we have to put it in an action plan and really have results.
And not always everything means that if there is a law, then the people will respect and will follow the law. This is one of the major issues.
Usually it works like this, and in other fields, in my experience, in other fields, it's usually the institutions that lead and show the people the way, and they shape the consciousness and the behavior of the people. However, in the LGBTI domain, the opposite is happening, at least in Greece. The political elites have been, although, you know, there are some forward-thinking politicians in all major parties that have ruled Greece after the transition to democracy, let's say. But they have been very, how to say, not ready and not sorry. They were very slow in enacting laws for the protection of LGBTI, and the society is moving forward, and we can see it in the social life, in the LGBTI prides of Athens and Thessaloniki that are massive. The society is changing, and it drags the politicians with them. Whereas usually it's the opposite.
Because of the, how to say, because they're always chasing for the voters. So this is an opportunity to be in trend and to follow what's happening in the social life. So Antonio, what do you think? How is the situation in our case?
I think it's similar, but also not that similar. In a way, Apostolis was on this first regional conference that our government organized in 2018, just days before the Pride. And he made a very clear example of how public opinion matters in Greece, and how the policies are shaped and advocated for based on the public opinion. And in our case, I think it's not the example, because the public opinion is negative, not in favor of us. Mostly the views and attitudes are pathologizing, meaning that homosexuality is still being perceived as illness or disease, and that LGBT people need to be treated or cured. And I think this is one of the reasons why we have made a bit of a shift in our policy and our priorities, meaning we have started invested heavily in mental health for LGBTI, because LGBTI people are themselves also suffering from this internalized homonegativity and internalizing discriminatory attitudes and beliefs about themselves. And as much as good policies and laws if we have in place, as good or well trained professionals in the state institutions we have, we will not be able to make a step forward if we don't have an empowered community and people who know their rights and who can report the abuses they endure and the violations of their rights that have to the state or to the organizations. We will not be really having a significant progress forward. And this has shown as the most effective way, because after a couple of years of testing in mental health for LGBTI, meaning providing individual and group psychotherapy for LGBTI, opening a national helpline for LGBTI, and also providing mobile social support, this increased the number of people requesting the services, in particular under the pandemic, which has resulted in double numbers of requests or demands for assistance from us, and has resulted also in providing state support of the safe house that we have, but also the LGBT helpline that we opened last year in August. So I think this is one of the key avenues we explore in advancing the status of the LGBT community in North Macedonia. But of course, these changes have to go parallel with the advocacy progress and also the progress with research or generation of evidence when it comes to the particular needs and issues that LGBT people have in the country.
I wanted to stress the importance of boosting the self-confidence of our community based on what you said, Antonio, because I can see this this process in our community as well. When we believed in ourselves, when we really thought we have the power, when we thought that we can do it, when we felt empowered, this is when we were able to go out and march in the streets. And this is how we created, how we transformed our agenda into a mainstream and changed the hearts and minds of the society. So I think, because you still believe that the society is negative, once they, because most of the people don't really, think about these things, they just go with the flow. If they feel that, the society is going to this direction, then they will change their mind automatically. That's why I consider very important to to mainstream our agenda. And this is the importance, the goal of our Pride, to show that we are not that marginal as you think. We are not people that exist in the margin of the society. We are inside it and we function with it.
Yes, indeed, mainstreaming LGBTI in society is one of the also key avenues that needs to be explored for advancing LGBTI rights and status. I would also add that, for example, the normalization of oppression, the normalization of discriminatory attitudes and beliefs about LGBTI that happens within the LGBTI community members results in living closeted lives or normalizing that gay is not okay, or living as LGBTI, open LGBTI can do harm, which of course can be the case, but when it comes to minimizing or actually eliminating the prejudices and stereotypes against LGBTI, there has to be some kind of interaction between the LGBTI and the non-LGBTI part of society. And this interaction cannot happen if there is no information from the LGBT community members that they are themselves LGBTI. And this is where the support from mental health professionals can come in place, because they empower the LGBT community members to feel first that they are okay with who they are, and second, to start living more authentic and more open lives, because they only have one life and this should not be wasted. Otherwise, the negative outcomes of living closeted and lives that are not productive, both at the workplace or in family environment, like a functioning life, can result or can be, self-harm, suicide, violence that is manifested at other grounds. For example, some of them very strong homophobes can be self-harming LGBT individuals, but also some of the biggest, let's say, nationalists and any kind of other haters can find a reason to hate the other different just because they have not accepted that part of themselves. So this means that hatred starts within ourselves, unfortunately, and is manifested outward in very different ways. This is why we invest heavily in mental health. We have hired 5 so far licensed psychologists and social workers. We have had more than 100 calls from 50 different users of the LGBTI helpline in a year. And we have sought support from the state, and we have actually received support from the state, financial support from the state, when it comes to the functioning of the LGBTI helpline. However, this is also important because when LGBTI person becomes less harmful towards themselves or less negative about themselves, they also start becoming aware that becoming an activist can be one of the avenues they can work on. And then the sustainability of the activism can be ensured, just because, you know, with the generations going and coming and leaving, there has to be a solid ground for, you know, breeding new activists. We need to have more and more LGBT activists, mostly coming from the youth LGBTI. And this is one of the ways that we use for making our LGBT activism sustainable.
I would like to add that everything, for example, I agree with you like 100%, but we can see that despite the laws that we have, like in the constitutions in both countries, we need to educate the people. We need the authorities to educate the people, to inform them, to respect each other. And at the end, we can see that except like homophobia, there is transphobia, there is Islamophobia, there are like sexist attacks, etc. So we need empowerment, we need visibility from all the people, for all the people at the same time. And I would like to proceed, for example, that what is like, for example, what the NGOs and the civil societies organizations and the activists can do in order to secure equality in all the sectors. For example, from your experiences.
Yeah, I would. This is what I would say, that we can't expect everything from the state, the authorities. Yes, it's very important to see that when civil society is functioning in a society, in a state, in a country, it can have great results. And the Macedonian civil society is, especially at least in the field that I know, it's very indicative on how we can transform a society that was supposed to be highly homophobic into, you know, now LGBTI visibility is much stronger. Let's not forget that the first LGBTI community center was in Skopje. So apart from what are the agendas of the ruling parties, it's the input of the civil society. And the other thing that I wanted to point out is that yes, we are talking about the situation, the current state of affairs of our community, but you know, not all members of our community have the same experiences, because for the most privileged ones, like the masculine gays or the feminine lesbians, okay, probably they face these institutional hurdles, obstructions, but when it comes to intersex or trans people, or you know, LGBTI people from rural areas or immigrants, the situation is much harder for them, or in minorities, in smaller societies, they don't have the same level of acceptance. And the situation that Antonio described, the internalized homophobia or the hatred that is produced towards another minority, is very common. And at least myself or people with the same experience, with the same how to say, professional or activist life, we face it daily, and this is something we have to work on, because the root of every discrimination is the fear or and yes, the fear for the different. So that's why our movement, and it's a global trend, and we're very happy about it, needs to be intersectional to combat any type of discrimination, and not we are okay, but let's target another vulnerable group.
We can see also the theory of intersectionality, for example, that there are stereotypes inside the movement. For example, in the LGBTQ plus movement, it's a total different thing to be like a white, gay European, if you compare it like a refugee, for example. And the same thing in other movements also, yeah.
Yes, I completely agree with what you both said. For example, we have been working with LGBTI Roma people here in North Macedonia for the past 2.5 years, 3 almost years, and we have seen the level of discrimination within the LGBT community against Roma LGBTI. And also we have seen, or the Roma people have themselves shown us or witnessed or reported to us the level of discrimination they experience within their Roma community just because they are LGBTI and Roma. And when it comes to providing support systems for these people, I think it's important to have all this in mind, just because some of them can really have no single source of support. So living as an openly gay, white Macedonian is or has some advantage when it comes to living as a trans woman who is Roma, who is also a sex worker. And this is something that we also have all the time in mind. And just because we will be all, there's this thing, we will all be free until everybody is free. And free from discrimination not only means for the ones who have the privilege not to be discriminated or not to be discriminated that often. It means that the most discriminated within our group have to also feel free from discrimination. I wanted to say something more about what Alexandros said when it comes to education. The prejudices and stereotypes, not only about LGBT, but also about women and anything that is different, do happen in the homes, transferred from the parents, and continue to be transferred from teachers in schools and other education professionals, and is being manifested among the peers in school environments. And this is really crucial when it comes to making some reforms in the education system, such as we have currently one in North Macedonia, with the attempt to reform our elementary school education, with promoting inclusivity and gender equality and freedom from violence within both the curriculum and also the practices of the teachers, including also training the teachers to become role models, not only for the pupils, but also for their colleagues, because this is an investment that will not be, we will not be able to see the fruits in 5 years from now, but maybe 20 years from now. So education is one area where there has to be significant reform done. We cannot expect changing of attitudes and beliefs among people who are over 50, 55, or 60 years old. They still believe, that, they have the same attitudes and beliefs from former Yugoslavia, where homosexuality or homosexual activities between two men have been illegal or criminalized. So education is one area, healthcare is another one. Discrimination here happens to a great level, especially when there is an intersection between living with HIV and being LGBTI. Another area is the social care services, where people are not really, professionals are not really able to provide the adequate social care service to trans people. Mostly, those are the cases that we have documented. And finally, judiciary. For us, the most important and the most difficult to work with is the judiciary system, meaning the judges, the prosecutors, as well as the police have shown the biggest resistance, let's say, not only because of lack of knowledge of the legal matter, but also not having the legal matter at all. as I mentioned, we only have the discrimination law and some regulation of the hate crime, but also just because they are kind of very heavy, very robust system to be hoping to change very soon. But once it is changed, for example, once we have a verdict in our favor, or like discrimination judgment in favor of us, then a significant change will be made. So this is why we have continuously advocated for prosecuting of all the hate speech that is occurring during and after Skopje Pride. Also, whenever a public event like a politician supporting us or a celebrity endorsing us, there's a heavy volume of hate speech on social media. This is why one of our key advocacy requests is actually regulating social media content when it comes to discriminatory hate speech against LGBTI, but also training journalists, especially editors-in-chief, to refrain from using hateful rhetoric or writing inadequately and not fulfilling the journalistic standards of ethical reporting when it comes to writing news articles in their portals or newspapers or kind of other media, either digital or traditional.
We'll see how this podcast will go. So I have one maybe short question, even though it's a wide topic, for my question that I will ask now. So basically, what I can perceive, and Antonio, please correct me if I'm wrong. The LGBT community in our country, those who are living in Skopje, who are Skopje-based, they are, let's say, more free, more privileged, and there are more places to, I don't know, to go out, to be accepted by the community. But in the smaller communities, there are many stereotypes, and not even if you're privileged and not, but there are few opportunities. The community is quite conservative and stereotypical. And also in the cross-border region, there are a lot of small places where gay people cannot go out, come out publicly that they are gay. So do you both think that we can advance or improve the situation if there is some kind of bilateral approach towards the position of the LGBT communities, especially in the smaller cities, towns who are on the cross-border region? Because I have crossed the border for several times, and when you go to the borders, then you'll see also in the Greek part that people are behaving more or less the traditions, the customs, everything is quite similar, according to my opinion. So that's why I'm asking, and I'm looking forward to the answer. Please, Antonio.
I would completely agree with you. One of the reasons why I think that Thessaloniki Pride had these promotional materials in Macedonian language earlier, and also had invited many Macedonians, especially from not only Skopje, but also from Strumica and Bitola, our kind of border towns near the Greek border, is the reason why I think addressing the issues and needs that people living in smaller towns or rural areas is also important. I think the Pride events that such as Thessaloniki Pride and Skopje Pride are also perceived as safe and open spaces for all, coming from everywhere. People can, wear masks or kind of hide their faces and still feel free and authentic who they are by attending the Pride parades. And I think this is, of course, one very small step, but it does help them become less and less afraid of and ashamed of who they are. And I think we have opened the National LGBT Helpline just because that we have many demands coming from people living outside Skopje, as well as from parents and teachers and healthcare workers dealing with LGBTI people at their workplace or their family environment. However, this is not enough. This is why we have opened the mobile psychosocial support service provision, which consists of a psychotherapist and a social worker coming to the place where the person that has requested support lives in. Such as, for example, we had one case in Deborah, a young trans girl who had issues with family, and then we had also the set of social work helping them together with our team. I think when it comes to the border or the cross-border cooperation, I have always said, like in Yugoslavia times, this border was really visible. Like people did not interact with each other that much, although they share and they still share so many, you know, similar cultures, similar identities, and struggles, and financial and societal. I think with the opening of the border, essentially after the Prespa agreement, I think this is really a very good opportunity for making these issues become less relevant and cooperation to get increased. I think when it comes to LGBTI people, for example, from North Macedonia studying in Greece, because there are some of them, this is also a very good opportunity to be used. And for example, these exchange opportunities like the Erasmus program that offers, like the ESC, and also the mobility exchanges between organizations or even universities or schools, can also help a lot when it comes to addressing LGBTI-phobic attitudes and beliefs within schools, healthcare institutions, or family environments. Finally, in the wider European term, we lack solidarity. We have seen this during the pandemic. Solidarity is key when it comes to building bridges between everybody, you know, not only nations, but also different regions or different cultures. Solidarity is key is also when helping less privileged than the one than we are, and this is especially aiming to the rich and privileged LGBT people in both countries, because those are the ones that we need to ask help from continuously in the future as well. It's not only the state, but it's also kind of an obligation by everybody who has the ability and the privilege to show and support the other. Unfortunately, we see a lot of solidarity or kind of willingness to support from the least privileged, like the LGBT Roma people. And this is kind of particular in our case, coming from Bitola and Strumica. There are quite many Roma LGBT people living there. And one of the reasons this is happening is just because it's they see this as an exit from their lived daily realities. You know, helping, getting to know each other, getting connection with somebody else, building a community, keeping in touch is also helping them a lot. So this is why we need to think of or reinvent some kind of our community building strategies in terms of addressing also the need to have within community building community itself. So if we are not solidaric within ourselves, like as a community, we should not be expecting too much from the others in a way.
That was
sorry.
Yes, there is a lag. That's why sometimes we speak at the same time. Go on.
I would like to add, of course, that it's very sad to see that there are so many like huge differences between the big and the small city, between the areas in its country. So I would like to continue, for example, from like your point of view. What would be like your future expectations from the government and from the authorities? Or what, for example, if North Macedonia will be like a member of the European Union, will lead the country in establishing like a legal framework strong enough to secure the LGBTQ plus rights? And for you, Apostolis, if, for example, the membership of Greece in the European Union has helped the country to involve and protect the LGBTQ plus rights?
Who should start? Okay. Yes, I think in the Greek case, it does work. Membership in the EU does work, but it's not that EU membership per se, is how the domestic political scene is using it. Because as I told you, I think I've mentioned before that in all ruling parties, there is like a forward-thinking elite that pushes forward the things. So in the Greek case, the EU argument was cited by them in order to forward things. But this is not, once you become member, and in the times that Greece became a member, we didn't have any EU conditionality. And once you become member, you don't have it. This tool is weakening, and we can see it in the cases of Hungary, Poland, maybe Bulgaria as well. Fortunately for the Greek case, we still say, this is something, the obligation, it somehow works, but it has to do with the political legacy or the tradition of domestically. When it comes to the Macedonian case, then we have the very powerful tool of EU conditionality, and still we can see how one ruling elite chose not to follow it, and of course the Greek veto helped it a lot, and how another ruling elite chose to follow it and become a good student. And that's why I insist that we should reward, let's say, we should give something in return to when you see that the domestic political elite follows the good examples, the good European examples. And after, and exactly because we have the Hungarian, the Polish examples, I think EU is moving towards establishing stricter rules, and that's it might be more difficult for North Macedonia to join, but it will be a healthier integration.
I fully agree with Apostolis. I would also add that, unfortunately, I say unfortunately because every society and every state should be guided or be led by democratic principles and human rights per se principles, not because of any other, for example, integration process such as the EU accession. But in our case, it helps because we as a society are still very fragile democratic society, and we need somebody to push us. I think the EU accession has shown its positive impact on improving not only when it comes to LGBT-related legislation, but also other legislation, and not only adopting it, but also implementing it. However, this depends on the political structures in power, and especially when it comes to judiciary, the level of professionalism and knowledge and skills on implementing the current laws and adopting the new laws and policies. I would have to kind of back off from EU accession currently, because with the Bulgarian obstacles, the North Macedonia's government is really challenged to progress forward in EU accession, and has, kind of used the Open Balkan Initiative as kind of a, let's say, substitute, although not a really substitute to EU accession. However, it's a good starting point, such as the case of Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg that happened long before the EU accession, EU or European community then. And I think they should continue in this direction. I would still keep having examples of Norway and Iceland as examples of how society should go forward when it comes to human rights progress, where EU accession is not the key process that kind of galvanizes the progress, but it's the sheer willingness, political willingness of the elites, and also the key demands of societies there to push for changes in the laws and policies, but also in the interpretation. Finally, I really hope that with increased cooperation and understanding between all the nations in the Balkans, I think there would be a possibility for citizens of the whole Balkan countries to see their role in how strong a democratic society can function. Because unless there is active citizenry or active citizenship in all the countries, and active monitoring of what the current governments, either at local, central level, do. We cannot have progress if we're not interested in politics, because politics is everywhere around us, and our political involvement and engagement has to be, I would say, compulsory kind of activity starting from adolescence and continuing until later and when we get retired, because this is the way we decide on what we want to do and what we live in and how we want to envision our future, not only for us, but also for the generations that come after us. And I really am happy that I'm part of this podcast, because Greek and Macedonian youth can learn so much about themselves through these mobilities, exchanges, cooperation, activities, and so on. And this is so important because those young people are really the future of countries. And as Apostolis mentioned in the beginning, we have really opened the Balkans much long before the open Balkans. I really hope that the Greek and Macedonian politicians really can learn from our example and go forward in the similar direction that we have started a couple of years ago.
They understand it and they want to follow it, but they are just in their own hateful rhetoric because they wanted, to attract some voters before. So now they cannot go open and say that, this is our common interest indeed. But this is, if I am allowed.
You are. It was very inspirational from Antonio, so you're very allowed. Go.
This is a common, I would say, trend in Southeast Europe, especially perhaps because we have to, internally meaning inside each country, we have to face and to fight the conservative, nationalist, patriarchal political views. So this is what brings us closer, and we can see that in the Southeast domain. For example, like everyone knows about the Greek Macedonian controversy. In the LGBTI sector, the activists are very well connected because we understand that, for example, advocating about the right of self-identification for trans people, we cannot exclude the right of self-identification for a nation. The same applies to Greeks and Turks. The activists, the LGBT activists between Greece and Turkey are so well connected, so solidar. They show so much solidarity to each other because we have to face the same opposition. Same with Serbia and Kosovo. Same with Croatia and Serbia and Bosnia. It's all over the region, and I want to point out that this is happening in our region, but not in other regions. So, for example, in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, in the Israeli-Arab conflict, you cannot see that. You cannot see that, the LGBTI activists are cooperating closer, or in the Caucasus region. I don't know why, but, we are exemplary in this field.
I think, I also agree that we also as a youth organization could do this cooperation for doing this struggle to make the bridge between the young people, and also you as LGBT activists, we should be an example that no matter what it will be signed, no matter the politics, when we have a common challenges and common interest, the way forward is on a bilateral way. So let's find this kind of common positive examples. And this was all a purpose of me and Alex to do this podcast, because it's time to show also the bright sides, not only to talk about the issues and the challenges that we have, but also there are, in this kind of difficult times and difficult topics and matters like the LGBT and human rights, there is also some let's say, bright side, that people are cooperating beyond the political and the nationalistic movements, because they have one common goal, and this is not excluding nation, people, race, and gender, but it's all the goal. It's one: everyone to be equal and to have the equal access to equal rights. So, Alex?
I would like to say that this podcast is like the first step that we are doing, like we're advocating, because LGBTQ plus rights are human rights. Also, the protection of the refugees are human rights. Gender equality, it's human rights. So we must educate, respect each other. And I think this podcast is something in order to give to many people, in order to educate themselves and listen like to a different, and to see a different perspective. So yeah, I would like to thank you all for this podcast. I would like to thank you, Anelia, Antonio, Apostolis, everyone, and that we must be like engaged on securing not only the LGBTQ plus rights, in general human rights, by doing our opinions like an everyday practice in our daily lives. So thank you, all of you.
Is it already over, huh?
You can
Better
say
engaging in
something
this.
for
Unfortunately,
the end.
yes.
But perhaps before we close, Antonio, don't you think we should share with the audience our common vision about Balkan Pride?
Please,
Of the
bilateral
Balkan
pride.
Federation at the LGBTI level. So
Amazing.
again, we will become a pioneer in unification in this region.
We can advocate. Can we advocate for a bilateral pride? Not Balkan, but bilateral, only between North Macedonia and Greece. It's in the benefit of our initiative. That's why I'm pushing.
Definitely.
We must find the city, though.
We had a name for this, but this should go off the record.
Should I turn off the recording now?
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Just now you can say bye, and then you will share.
In a way, I mean, I think Balkan Pride is a logical just continuation of what we have done in the region so far in the past couple of years. We are so many countries in such a small territory sharing, the same issues, problems. The community are more or less in the same status everywhere, and I think this is just a natural step forward. However, it's still informal, not so structured. The pandemic also hit us heavily. We didn't have any Pride last year, at least physical one, and we were also very unhappy. I was personally very dissatisfied that I was not able to go to Thessaloniki Pride and Euro Pride at the same time, just because of the pandemic. But we're looking forward to Belgrade hosting next year's Euro Pride, and then hopefully Thessaloniki Pride.
Yes, it was written in the agenda, but we didn't mention it.
But the Pride can start from Thessaloniki to go through the highway friendship.
Yeah, exactly.
To cross through Skopje and then to go to Belgrade. So I think we can manage.
We will ask for support from the youth cooperation you have then when we analyze it.
Yes, we will be happy to assist you. Thank you also from my side. I really enjoyed your energy, and I hope.
Yeah, me too.
And I hope this is only a start of a good cooperation between the youth cooperation offices, our initiative, which is Cooperation for a Common Future. And let's see if we are all under a common rainbow. So I would like everyone who are listening to us to share, comment, express their thoughts about what we have discussed today. Those who are planning to do a hate speech, the comments will be blocked and deleted. This is what I'm promising.
Thank you all, guys. Also. Thank you.
Ευχαριστούμε.
Okay, see you for next topic, Alex. We will agree mutually what the next topic will be.
We will agree and we will continue this podcast with another amazing podcast.
For sure.